Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
So, is there a pandemic within the pandemic? That will be our topic today. Is there more going on than meets the eye? Yeah, hot topic. But first, before we get into that, another huge thank you to our patrons. We just had 2 new patrons come on board this weekend, and we're really grateful for that. So It's always exciting when we get the notifications and we see that there are new patrons. And we just love getting to know people, and we love that people support the podcast and keep it going and make it possible. And we're just super glad about that. So
we sure are. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I want you to start out, Mom, by talking about some of the statistics with the intimate partner violence, because that is a huge issue, especially with the pandemic, with just so many different compound issues going on, from health issues, critical health issues, to deaths in the family, to job loss, to struggling economy, to not being able to get goods. You order something and it can be weeks or months.
Right.
That's impacting the contracting business big time, and on and on and on and on. Fuel prices are through the roof, inflation through the roof, groceries through the roof. You know, there are so many compound issues going on right now. So
I think just as you're speaking, Jimmy, we can feel the stress, the tension build within us. We live in a different time. COVID, whether we like it or not, has changed our lives dramatically, not just with the virus, but all the ripple effects from as a result of this deadly and mysterious virus, which has impacted all of us, whether we like to admit it or not. In some shape or form, we have all been affected by this. We're seeing within the home such big changes right now, and often I think we don't pay close enough attention to how those changes have affected families. I talk to so many people now who work from home. Before COVID, it was the rare person who had the work at home job. Now it's almost becoming a norm. You know, when they
and
say,
it's becoming a necessity for a lot of people.
and out of necessity, right? Along with that, and you are so right, there has been financial stress, job loss. We see a lot of people unemployed or part-time employed because their regular jobs are just not there anymore. Also, we have to wait so long for goods that we order. We're waiting 6 and 8 months sometimes. I know at my job, when I order something that is manufactured that we need, we're being told it's a good 6-month wait. I've been shown pictures of warehouses that are totally empty, which means, you know, there are not people working yet. We're just not up to par.
Well, it's going to get a lot worse
It
too.
is, it is. Right.
There's a I just flew this past weekend, and it was an absolute nightmare.
I wondered how it was.
No, I did not fly Southwest. So I flew one of the reliable airlines. I flew United, and still, I mean, just it is these.
Things have changed.
I've flown my whole life.
Yeah.
And I've never seen what I witnessed this past weekend. I mean, just utter
It's
chaos.
chaos.
And
I think that's the world in which we live
yeah,
anymore, isn't it?
I mean, I ended up yesterday, what should have been, a 6 hour day ended up being, what is 13, over 13 hours it took me to get
Oh,
home.
wow.
And,
Yeah.
I rolled in well, I got to the house at about 1 in the morning. I should have been home hours and hours and hours before that. So I think this is so typical right now of what's going
It
on. It
is.
just people are on edge and tempers are flaring and
I think, and it's true what you're saying. And just as you're talking again, I could feel my insides kind of tense up. What used to be easy and relaxing, you get a flight, you sit back, you read a book on the plane, and you're getting to where you have to go. Not anymore. Everything's complicated.
yeah.
Everything that we do. So, what's all this have to do with the pandemic within the pandemic? Well, the pandemic within is what's happening in the world of abuse. All this stress, all this anger, all this tension, all of this loss has created a lot of violence. And I'm going to call it that because that's what it is. We are seeing that partner to partner violence has escalated tremendously within the home. Job loss alone causes all kinds of friction. And you can well imagine when you add children to that factor. When I think of having gone through periods of that in my own married life, I know how hard it was. And they were only short periods of time. This is unknown.
Well, that was another component that I was going to mention and didn't bring it up, but childcare. You can't
Oh,
find
yeah.
childcare anymore.
I just read something that as much as 60% of our child care is going away.
Yeah, I think so. My wife is assistant director and preschool teacher of a daycare center here in town, and I think she told me that there was another one that just closed their doors because they can't find staffing, and so it was either they shut themselves down or the
Right.
state was going to shut them
Yep.
down because they can't
Absolutely.
have the right ratios.
Right.
This is happening all over the place, and it's like this domino effect. And this is neither pro nor con vaccines, whatever. I'm vaccinated,
No,
you're
yeah.
vaccinated.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
so this is neither pro nor con, but this policy that's coming from Washington D.C. that's mandating vaccines, I think they don't realize or they don't care one or the other. I think they're really ignorant though of what's going to happen. But this is going to I think it'll create an economic collapse. I really do. We're already seeing it within the airline industry.
Right.
And I just saw an article today where they interviewed a couple different pilots, and they were saying, we are on the brink of this complete shutdown of transportation. And
Right.
they said if that happens, it's not just people being transported. They said, think of all the goods that
It's
come over
goods.
from
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, all over the place.
Then
but
we
you
have the
mail,
trucking
you have-
industry. We have you have all of the others that
which
are going
they're
to follow
already on the
along.
verge of
Right.
collapse because it's such a sensitive,
It is.
intricate system. I used
Right.
to be a trucker, so I was in that industry, and it was bad 20 years ago, and it is magnified exponentially. And it just the shortage of drivers, and that's always been a problem. But now
Right.
it's at a critical mass. It's at this critical moment where they need all the drivers they can get, and this mandate, whether we like it or not, and again, I'm not even going to express my opinion because it doesn't matter.
Right.
But whether we like it or not, there are going to be people who will take a stand. They believe what they want to believe, and
Right.
they would either quit their job or be fired on principle than to be forced to do something.
Right.
And you're going to have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people leaving these industries where every single person is critical to
Yep.
that industry's survival.
Absolutely. And we're at a most critical point right now. So we can't stand another link being broken. is basically what you're saying. And as this all happens, what's happening within our homes is a nightmare in the world of abuse
Mm-hmm.
because we have husbands and wives at odds with each other, which is where there already was physical abuse, mental abuse. It's
Neglect,
escalated.
spiritual
Oh my
abuse,
goodness!
emotional. Yeah.
It's out the roof. It truly is. Then you have children who are in this mix who already were being abused, and now, I mean, the least bit of extra tension, and parents are, just slamming at their children. But the hard part for all of us is the reporting on all of this has gone down by, according to several surveys that I've been reading, by as much as 50% or more. And the reason is the whole system of reporting is in utter chaos, too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you hit on every single thing. It's lack of finances to keep these systems going, lack of people who can work in these systems, lack of trained people who can take care of the big burden, the
Mm-hmm.
overload, and also an inability to report.
Well, I mean, this is something else that I mean, I think this is just another component to that, but because there's such fierce competition to hire people and such desperation to hire people, um, there are jobs that can't pay more, and then other jobs
Yeah.
where workers are critical. Social work,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely critical
Right.
that we have those workers. Healthcare, absolutely critical that we have nurses and doctors.
And we've had so many fall out of the line of duty
Yep.
because
We,
they're overworked and
yep.
overburdened.
But then
Just
you have places like I mean, this is a true story. We had one of my church members um, was talking to my wife and his wife, and they were kind of lamenting about their jobs and just kind of talking about how hard it is, and he just kind of smiles and he goes, "You want to leave all that stress and go somewhere where it's low stress and good pay?" He goes, "Chick-fil-A's hiring $22 an hour.
I knew you'd say that,
$22 an
which is
hour.
higher than our U.S. postal system, who is advertising continuously starting salary at $18.
That's higher than some of our nurses
Yeah.
around
Oh,
here."
yeah. Yeah. It's unbelievable what's happening. Everything is
Crazy.
topsy turvy. It really is. And this chaos just creates more and more stress and more anger, violence, abuse within the home. So we've painted like this picture of what is happening. And truly believe we've only touched the tip of the iceberg
Mm-hmm.
with what we're saying. And that isn't our goal to get you more stressed and to say we are in a hopeless situation, but we want to take this knowledge of what we have and figure out what in the world can we do to help. What do we do to change this pandemic within the pandemic?
Yeah.
Because the pandemic isn't going to go away.
No.
It's not going to go
No,
away.
I mean,
No.
I mean, if anything, it's getting exasperated because now you have the education system, which is I think on the brink of disaster. You have
Oh, yeah.
the DOJ now is meddling in school board meetings and shutting parents down. You have school boards versus school unions versus parents versus students, and I don't think we've ever witnessed this level of disunity at every level.
Right,
I mean,
it is.
from
It is.
Washington, which they kind of have set the tone. I think they've done a really terrible job of dividing people. This is no particular political party. I mean, it's both parties are equally.
I think when you try to force
guilty.
something on people, mandate people, there's always going to be that rebuff. None of us like to be told what we have to do. And you're going to find people recoiling, and they are big time.
Yeah.
I think they're just fed up.
But it's not
with
just that.
everything.
It's the meanness and the nastiness.
Oh, it's
and,
all, it's the whole compound. Yeah.
If you don't do this, then you're and we
Right.
talked about this before. It's the name calling. It's the always being angry, always being negative, always telling people what they're doing wrong and what they have to be doing. And you know, I look back, and you and I were just talking about this. I look back, and it wasn't that long ago where there were TV shows that exploded in viewership because they were inspiring people. You
Right.
know, it was like these inspiring stories,
Yeah.
and people still migrate to that because I think
Because
that's
we
human
need
nature.
that
Yeah,
desperately. We need that
absolutely,
so much.
and we're not hearing it a whole lot.
We have been bombarded with the negatives. I let out kind of a hollow scream yesterday morning by about my fifth phone call before I even got to work of negative, 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 negative. That's
All
all
the things that
I
are
am
wrong.
hearing. Yes, this and this person did this and this person did that. Did you see what I walked into work to find? Blah, 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 blah. And I was just let out this big whoa, to myself. Is there not one positive thing that is right about this? And I'm thinking, but we've been trained, so to speak, to see the negative. The past several years, our eyes have been almost pointed to pick up on all the negative, negative, negative. And so that's where we are right now, which has compounded this pandemic that we're in. Granted, it's a terrible situation, but there still are wonderful blessings all around us.
Well, and I think that's the important thing to highlight is that the only way we're going to pull out of all this stuff is if people start working together. Right now, people
Yes.
are really. I don't even know if it's for the most part because I don't think that's probably true. I think it just probably feels like that. But there are enough people who are working against each other that I think it's just creating this domino effect where you have collapse on top of collapse on top of collapse, and throw into the mix of that that there are legitimately people who are losing loved ones. I mean, every single day
Right.
there's somebody who I personally know who's posting about a family member who died.
There's
Not
so
all
much,
of those are COVID, but
No.
but it's just there's death and destruction everywhere.
Right.
And the only way we're going to pull out of this is for people to recognize trauma and just roll up your sleeves and help your neighbor out. And I will say, as chaotic as these airports were that I was in, and I was in Chicago O'Hare. That was the one where I
I
spent
hate
most of
that
my
airport.
time. And out of all the
That's
airports,
a rough one.
that and Houston were the two airports that I probably hate the most. And I had to spend the most time
Rough.
at both of those
It's rough,
airports.
yeah.
But all that aside, like I don't care, whatever. Like when I travel, I expect that anything can happen. So I'm not one of those
I
passengers.
remember you running, Jimmy, on our Haiti trip, the one trip, to grab that one seat when the rest of us got left behind. Do you remember that?
No,
Jimmy.
I think you're making this
No,
up.
I'm not. You left the rest of us behind. There was one
Oh
seat.
yeah, that's right. I
Yes,
did, didn't I?
in Florida.
I flew back home.
Yes, you flew back home, left us with dengue fever and all that good stuff,
Yep.
vomiting.
I think that's because
and
I had to go back and work. I had to preach.
I
Remember
think
that?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
had to get back.
We got-
I know.
so-
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
plus, I had little kids that
Yes,
were
and there was
waiting at
one
home.
seat, and we all said, "Go for it," and you
Yep,
did.
and I
Yeah,
did.
and you did.
And they were literally shutting the door
Yes.
to the gate. I was the last one on the
Oh,
plane.
yeah,
and I
you
barely
were.
made it.
Yeah, yes.
Man, I forgot all about that.
I
How
didn't.
selfish of me.
We
But,
were
you know,
glad for you.
When I fly, I just expect anything can happen, so I never get worked up. It is what it is. But I will say, as chaotic as it was at these airports, and there were some tempers that kind of flared a little bit. I mean, nothing bad. But I will say that people generally, in both of those jam-packed airports, they were really kind to each other.
That's
and
nice
that's the
to
stuff we
hear.
don't hear about.
That is so nice to
That
hear.
People,
I know.
people, even though people are stressed out, traveling is stressful, life is stressful, people are dealing with all kinds of losses. People were very civil and very kind and
I
very gracious towards
I
each
am
other.
so glad you're saying this because in the past 2 weeks, I personally have received so many unexpected kindnesses in my life that it's been such an inspiration and encouragement to
Yeah.
me in the form of notes,
Mm-hmm.
food, visits, totally unexpected visits. I just feel it has lifted me so much
Yeah.
to feel that people have not lost the ability to care,
Yeah.
and we haven't lost that, and we need to start focusing on that and using that ability to create some change in these very difficult situations
Mm-hmm.
here. There are people crying out for help. They are crying out for compassion,
Yeah.
just crying out for somebody to see them and to care. And I was thinking how difficult it is anymore to pick up the emotions on someone when they are masked. And isn't it weird when you have a mask on, at least for me? And I've been wearing one when I go out shopping and all, simply because they're not mandated, but because I do. And I hold my head kind of down when
Mm-hmm.
I'm masked, and I don't have eye contact with people that way. And I hate that. I need to
Yeah.
improve on that. But we can't read people like we would when we're not masked. We can't
Right.
smile. I can't see if they're smiling at me or if they're frowning, or they can't see if I'm smiling at them. Times are different and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we need that ability to have contact with each other in a human way,
Well,
extend
I mean,
compassion.
yeah, I mean that brings up another point too, because that's obviously the mask thing is a huge,
Mm-hmm.
huge hot button, just crazy,
Mm-hmm.
insane um, hot button issue in our country. And again, regardless of where you stand,
Yeah.
whether you like to mask, don't like to mask, won't mask, have to mask, wherever you fall on that spectrum, just be kind to each other.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Exactly.
Like, you know,
Yes. Yes.
um, I see these people picketing out in front of schools and like dropping f bombs
No.
in front of
Yeah.
little kids and
No. That's
scaring the living crap out of them. And
and
I'm
it
like,
does, and I
what
think
what
that's
purpose does that
awful.
serve?
It does create such
Um,
fear.
just be nice. Like I think teachers and probably in most cases, not all, but I mean in most cases, school boards, I think they're trying to do the best that they know how
Mm-hmm.
to do
I
given a
think so
really
too.
horrible
Yeah.
situation.
Yep.
So, like us, our
There.
kids have to be masked all day long. I hate it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say, I hate that our kids have to be masked all day.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, like, we don't make a big deal about it with our kids. Our kids, for them, it's just kind of routine. They don't complain about it. So we don't make a big deal about it.
And,
They go
and
to
I
school
think that's
and,
it. To quit
you
making
know,
such a big deal, we need to just do what we
about
need to
everything
do to
though.
get.
Like we
Yes.
do this with everything. We
Yes.
take
Right.
I mean, the mask is just one example, but
Mm-hmm.
we do that with everything. And if people just stop doing that and just be kind and gracious and compassionate to each other, and some of these kids that they don't get a choice. They have to wear a mask for or whatever, whatever it is. But that's just an example. Um, they may have a really, 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 really violent, awful,
Mm-hmm.
traumatic home life. They don't need to see people yelling and shouting each other down um, over that dumb mask. They
If there
need to
is,
see
yes.
compassion,
Ah.
and they need to see kindness, and they need people to, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
they need people to see them.
Yes. If there's one takeaway from all of this, I think that's what I would love people to take away is that we need to show children a strength and character with kindness and compassion.
Hmm.
They're seeing so much fear and anger and chaos. They don't know what to make of any of this.
Yeah.
And when we create even more can you imagine what goes on in their little minds, their young minds, or their teenage
Well,
minds?
that's not how
or,
childhood's supposed to be.
No.
God didn't create us
No.
to be living in fear and intimidation and yelling and screaming and violence and, name calling and all that stuff. Like, I remember it, as bad as our home was for some siblings, we've talked about this before.
Right.
For me, it genuinely was a carefree
I was going to say,
childhood.
if you can set aside those moments of abuse, which we were not at all aware of, the overall environment was a calm and
Yeah, it was carefree. It was
yes,
the way kids
you
are
kids were
supposed
kids.
to be. And
You
in
grew
your
up as kids.
in your formative years, that's so important.
Right, it
that you
is,
get to
yes.
be a kid.
Right.
Don't take that from the kids who are already getting that childhood stripped away by abusers. We really need to link arms with each other, and we need to inspire people, and we need to highlight stories of kindness and success, and
we need to be that embodiment of that person that is a person of compassion. When I think of the violence that goes on in so many homes, and I think of women trapped in violent situations, I know of some who are, and they don't know what to do. Shelters are closing, shelters are overcrowded. Once again, funding has come into play, staffing has come into play. Where there's no child care, that means the children, maybe mom who needed to work can't because she's now got to stay with the children, which causes multiple layers of stress, added stress. So we have all this going on. For those of us who are blessed enough to not be in that situation, we need to keep our stuff together and be an embodiment of compassion, love, and strength to those who need it.
yes.
That's what God expects of us. We need to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And when we are that, we will see change happening. I truly, truly believe that with all my heart.
Yeah, and until that happens, we're not going to see
No.
any positive change,
No.
and we really need to. We need to be consistent in the way we treat people. What I witnessed this past weekend, and the church that I went to, I was there training a church for grace, and I couldn't have asked for a better group of people to work with, a better welcome, a better church that just really gets it. I mean, they really, really, really get the protection of vulnerable and innocence.
That's so good to hear, Jimmy. That is so good. We all need to hear that message loud and clear.
Well, and they went out of their
do.
way to select people on their policy team who had trauma in their past, and
Wow.
men and women, both. There was, I don't want to say there was an equal representation, because there were definitely more women than there were men, and they started sharing their stories, and I thought, how incredible is this, that everything that we ask for as advocates, they did that and then some. And I thought that this is really
awesome.
powerful.
It is.
And guys, I'm telling you, these churches exist out there. I'm telling you.
That is
They
so
exist.
encouraging.
They weren't weird. I like me and the lead pastor at this church. He was getting fired up, and like, it was funny because he had missed one of the sessions that I was at, and I had used a phrase about abusers and what I would do if I caught somebody. Well, then he came into another session. He literally said the same thing, and he's like, sorry if you're not used to hearing a pastor talk like this. I was like, you are my spirit animal. I really like you, because
That's awesome.
he wasn't like this weird, untouchable, like bow down to,
I love it. Yes.
like cool hip pastor. He was just like,
He was a real deal.
he was a real
Yeah,
person.
he was
And
a real deal.
and he talked to me like I was a real person, and he let me
That's
talk to
awesome.
him like he was a real
Wonderful.
person. And I was like, this church gets it. This church genuinely gets it.
There are churches who get it. There are people like you and me and our listeners who get it.
Yeah.
We get it. We need to keep ourselves encouraged and not become so discouraged that we become part of those who are clamoring through life, just stumbling and falling and getting so stressed that their tempers flare and that there is a created havoc within the home, within the community, schools, churches, and whatnot.
Yeah.
We need to keep our stuff together. And I like what you said about linking arms.
We have to.
We need to link arms and keep each other standing so that we can march on and continue to do what we were created to do.
Well, I told them at this church, I said, my parting message for you guys is that I always get encouraged whenever we have churches come in, whether it's, I'm doing a training or it's through grace or whatever. To me, it doesn't matter. I've talked about this before. I'm not into labeling and branding, and I could care less. Somebody gives me a microphone, I'm going to use it, and I'm going to talk. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
But I told this church, I said, one of the things that I really, really, really get encouraged about is that we now have more people who are joining this force to stand up against evil. And I have phone numbers and I have emails of people there at that church. And every church that I go to, or every organization, every police department I go to, every military base that I wind up at, there's more and more people that I'm just filling my contact list in my phone. And I'm like, this is incredible. I have all these names of people
Wonderful.
who are joining this battle to fight evil.
Right.
I know where they stand. And that's powerful. You can't buy that with any amount of money.
We have an army that is forming.
It is, and it's so cool, and it's so incredible.
Yes.
And I think that will inspire us.
How do we, Jimmy, take all of this? How do we continue to be encouraged when the world about us is so negative, just pounding negative at us every hour of the day? And it really is, How do we take moments of this encouragement and do something that's really good, valuable, resourceful with it?
Well, I think there are two things. One, always honor the threat. You never just write people off or drown out noise and say, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I only want to hear all the good things, like the Joel Osteens of the world. I only want to hear good things. Well, the reality is there's a lot of bad in the world, and there are real, legitimate, genuine threats. Honor the threat, but don't be paralyzed by that threat. Link arms with people and, continue educating people and continue finding people who are willing to fight. They're out there.
I was going to say, we need to find those people in our army and link up with them.
There are people,
just what you're
doing. People in our town, in your town, in your city, in your suburbs. There are people in your inner circle who are willing to fight this battle with you. I mean, all you have to do is ask. So I'm super encouraged by that. And I think again, honor the threat, but don't ignore the threat and don't drown it out. But don't get sucked in by that either, and don't become defeated and deflated and be like, well, what's the point? There's no hope.
Don't become part of the threat. In other words, yes. And what about the children that need help, that don't know where or how to seek help?
Yeah, I like your idea of getting phone numbers in their hands, giving them avenues, hotlines to call. We have suicide prevention hotlines. We have a national hotline for domestic violence. We can get the phone numbers into the hands of kids pretty easily, and it doesn't require a lot of time or money. And they just need to be aware.
This is something Jimmy and I were talking about prior to the podcast. And I said, I am a person that feels like I need to be doing something. If I'm not doing something, I feel like I'm not accomplishing anything. So I'm going to take it upon myself to begin posting these numbers, these hotline numbers all around. Wherever I see a bulletin board, wherever I see the opportunity, I'm going to have those numbers with me in my vehicle, in my purse, on me, and post them around, because we never know when someone is going to reach out for that anchor and take it and need it. We have mental health, we have, physical abuse, we have all just regular abuse of hotlines. We need to get those numbers in the hands of really everyone, so that they have
old
them.
and young alike.
Every child knows 911. Well, they should know the abuse hotlines also. That's, to me, that's critical. That they have some place, somewhere that they can seek and get help. In the meantime, we need to keep building these armies of people up so that our children are surrounded by this help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
100%.
Yep.
So, we'll close on that note, and
let's build our army. How's that for
you
our
have a truth bomb for
there
us?
you go. Our truth bomb is, let's continue to link arms and continue to grow our army.
I've had multiple people ask me recently, what can we do to help you guys? Talking about us. And, for any of you listening, I just tell you, share the work that we do. Share this podcast.
Please, yes.
If you find a particular episode that you like, share it. Let people know about the books that we write. We have resources that are out there, and we really genuinely want to get them into the hands of people, because we want to save lives. That's it. So, again, thank you guys. As always, thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the rewards our patrons receive.